Ever find yourself looking at a bottle of whiskey and wondering if you're reading English? Today we're going to go through 5 common terms you'll see on a whiskey bottle and what they mean. Stick around. Hi, I'm Tim from Elma Wine and Liquor. Today we are going to go over 5 different terms that are common on whiskey bottles, particularly bourbon, in the United States, and go over what those terms mean. So I have a lineup of Benchmark Bourbon. It's a classic old school bourbon from the Buffalo Trace Distillery. And I picked this lineup because it has some of those key terms in different bottlings. So if you're so inclined, you can go out and grab a bottle of each to see if there's any difference between what those terms mean to you. Just to start out with, one of the most common ones, Kentucky Straight Bourbon whiskey. So that's more than one word. The phrase in itself has a meaning, but breaking down each word, Kentucky, if the word Kentucky is on the label, that means it has to be made in the state of Kentucky. You will talk to people that claim that all bourbon has to come from Kentucky. That is not true. Bourbon just has to be made in the United States. It does not need to be made in Kentucky. So if you see the word Kentucky on it, you know that it was distilled in Kentucky. The word straight can only be put on the bottle if it is aged more than 2 years. Again, there's a lot of misinformation about how long bourbon needs to be aged. It technically just needs to be aged for a couple minutes in a new charred American oak barrel. But as long as it's more than 2 years, they can use the word straight on it. If it's less than 4 years, they do need to add an age statement on it. So straight means at least 2 years in those oak barrels. And then bourbon means that it's at least 51% corn. It's aged in new charred American oak barrels. And that's basically it for bourbon. So that's our first term, Kentucky Straight Bourbon. Next up, we have top floor. So top floor indicates that the barrels, while they were aging, were stored on the top floor of the rickhouse. Rickhouse is the building where barrels are stored during the aging process. Most distilleries don't rotate their barrels around. Wherever that barrel goes, that's where it sits for its entire aging life. Top floor means that barrel sits on that top floor the entire time. There are some whiskey drinkers, bourbon drinkers, that prefer the top floor barrels. What happens up in that top floor of the rickhouse in the Kentucky sun or wherever it's aging is the heat rises. So it gets very hot up in those top floors. That means that there's more evaporation usually. It's a little bit drier, so the water is escaping. You end up with a more flavorful, more robust bourbon when it is aging in the higher tiers, because it also gets more in and out of the oak of the wood. So that's where the bourbon gets a lot of its flavor from, is it gets sucked into the wood and spit back out into the barrel with those high heats. So the hotter it is, the more of that flavor you're going to get. So top floor just very simply means it's aged on the top floor of the rickhouse. Next up, we have single barrel. I know I've done this in other videos. Single barrels just means that everything in this bottle came from one single barrel of bourbon. A barrel holds about 53 gallons. When they are making big batches of bourbon, they'll take hundreds or thousands of those barrels of the Benchmark bourbon, dump them into big vats, and then fill the bottles. So there could be 100 different barrels of bourbon in this one bottle. Whereas in this one, there is only one, every single drop of this liquid came from one single barrel. Like I just mentioned, bourbon gets a lot of its flavor from the barrel, from that distillate going in and out of the oak. Every single barrel of bourbon is going to taste a little bit different because it came from different trees, because it's stored in different parts of the rickhouse, because that oak has different flavor dynamics in it. So it came from different parts of the tree. Every single barrel will taste a little bit different. Some will be sweeter and lighter, some will be richer and spicier. So single barrel just means that every drop came from one barrel of bourbon. Next up, full proof. What this means is that the bottle is bottled at the same proof that the liquid went into the barrel at. Bourbon distillers are allowed to put their bourbon into the barrel at up to 125 proof. They can't go higher than that. They will go lower sometimes because they think it adds more flavor to it. Because when you go in at the high proof and then you're proofing it down to 80 proof, what you're doing is you're adding water after the aging process. So some distilleries like to add the water before the aging. They might still need to add a little bit more after, but they like to do it before. With Benchmark in particular, they go into barrel at 125 proof, and then this full proof is bottled at 125 proof. So if when it's done aging, it's at 126 or 130 or 135, they just proof it down to match the proof that it went in at, 125. Some of the barrels might come out at exactly 125, and that's what they'll bottle it at. Full proof is slightly different than cask strength, which will be bottled at the strength that it comes out of the cask at. So if it came out at 126 or 128, that's what they would bottle it at. So full proof is the proof that the distillate went into the barrel. It's bottled at that same proof coming out of the barrel. Last up, we have bonded. Bonded is just another word for bottled in bond. This came out of the Bottled in Bond Act of 1897 or 1887, which essentially said that the whiskey to be called a bottled in bond needed to be from a single distillery in a single distillation season, and it had to be aged in a bonded warehouse, a government bonded, so this was like government controlled warehouse for a minimum of 4 years, and it had to be bottled at exactly 100 proof, 50% alcohol by volume. This came about because in the 1800s, it was literally the Wild West of whiskey production. You've seen those old Western movies with the big barrels sitting behind the bars, guys just grabbing bottles, and nobody really knew what was in those bottles or what was in those barrels. Bartenders and pharmacists at the time, because whiskey was sold in pharmacies, was being watered down, diluted, having stuff added to it. So the government stepped in and said, you know what, consumers want to know that they're getting the real product. So we'll create these bonded warehouses where government officials held those barrels under lock and key away from the distillers themselves for a minimum of 4 years. And then they made sure that when that was bottled, it was bottled at exactly 100 proof. So everybody knew what they were getting. It was a marketing thing, but also a government control thing to make sure that consumers were getting the product that they thought they were getting. It still exists today with the bottled in bond because, again, consumers want to have that little bit of reassurance that they are getting what they think they're getting. To my knowledge, they are not putting those barrels in a government warehouse necessarily anymore, but they are still testifying that they are aged minimum 4 years and that it is bottled at 100 proof. So those are our 5 terms for today: Kentucky Straight Bourbon, top floor, single barrel, full proof, and bonded or bottled in bond. Hope this helps you next time you're shopping for a bottle of whiskey. Please let us know in the comments what other terms or what other definitions you want to know. We'd love to talk to more of you about all these crazy terms that we use in the alcohol world. Look forward to seeing you again soon. Cheers.